I'm going to begin with a little bit of a confession. The adventure that brought me here to you today began a little undemocratically. Back in the last century, I was a graduate student at Oxford University in the UK. And one evening, there was a fundraiser for the rowing crew. Now, this is going to sound old-fashioned, but picture this. The guys had these styrofoam cups that they marked with their names on it. And we women would pay £1 sterling and get 5 tickets. We'd write our own names on the tickets and put them in different cups. The men would draw a name out, and they'd have to take that person out on a date. This is true. Now, I must have been feeling kind of flush that night because I spent £2 and bought 10 tickets. And there was a rower who I had my eye on. He was kind of smart and funny, and so I decided to give fate a little push. I put 8 of my tickets in his cup. I didn't want to put all 10 in because I would have seemed like some kind of a stalker, right? So inevitably, this funny and smart man from Iceland drew my name, took me out on a date, and thus began a beautiful love story. But not quite as you might expect. If you fast forward 17 years to 2016, by now I had moved to Iceland, married the rower, who was a professor of history, founded a company, worked as a journalist, started the Iceland Writers Retreat, had 4 children in just under 6 years, and then that fine spring, my husband, with no previous ambition to public life, was elected the 6th ever president of my adopted country. So all of a sudden, within the span of a few months, I, who grew up on a hobby farm just outside of Ottawa in Canada, found myself hardly ever having to wait in line at the airport, people cooking a lot of my meals, people running in and out of my house all the time, and literally dining next to kings and queens. I actually had to Google how you curtsy. Surreal is, of course, one of the first words that leaps to mind when I think about this unexpected adventure that came into our lives, but also privilege, opportunity, gratefulness, and of course, fun. What a wonderful, fun, unexpected opportunity and a chance to do some good and serve my country. It was and is an honor. But also, all of a sudden, it was like I was no longer Eliza. I was the president's wife, the First Lady, consigned to the role of genteel sidekick. People stopped asking me how my work was going because, of course, most people assumed that I'd stopped working since my husband had been elected to a new job. Instead, I was asked, what are you wearing? How are the children adjusting to the new situation? Or, of course, if I were abroad, who's looking after them in your absence? Or maybe I wasn't asked anything at all. Very often, it was assumed that I would be accompanying my husband to some sort of event simply because he had confirmed his attendance, as if I were some sort of human handbag he could grab with him and display silently by his side at public appearances. It really becomes hard to adjust to the reality that I'm more often known as someone's wife than I am as me. Now in Iceland, as in most other republics, there is no formally defined role for the spouse of the head of state, should there even be one. I haven't been elected to a position, so as First Lady, I don't have a salary or clothing allowance or dedicated staff or anything like that. I'm not formally obliged to do anything. But obviously, it would probably raise a few eyebrows if I weren't next to my husband to attend a state visit, say, or to receive foreign dignitaries. Now, at first, this sort of undefined nature of the role made me a little intimidated. I knew that I wanted to be active and engaged, but I didn't want to make a protocol faux pas. I didn't want to mess up my accented Icelandic, so I said something incomprehensible. This has happened anyway. And I didn't want to act too entitled or demanding, but on the other hand, I didn't want to seem too casual for the dignity of the office. I was thinking, what am I allowed to do and what am I not allowed to do? There's no handbook to go along with my new gig. But then, I realized that visibility and representation matter. In Iceland, we're really proud that in 1980, we elected a female president. And around that time, a story goes that a boy once asked his parents, "Is it possible for boys to be presidents too?" So, like it or not, those of us in public roles, we are helping to shape perceptions about what we do. And for even those of us not in public roles, we can have a similar influence within our nearest circles. I mean, we can all be role models. So as I reflected upon that and I began to think about it, I thought, well, even if there is no handbook for how to be a first lady, why not just use my own experience, trust in my own integrity, and do it the way that I want to do it? I mean, shouldn't all of us who are in some sort of a role with the outdated expectations or stereotypes do exactly the same thing? And really, Iceland is the best place from which to update this role. Iceland has topped the World Economic Forum's Global Equality Index for the last 10 years. The United States is 51st on that list. As I mentioned before, we elected the world's first democratically elected female head of state in 1980, and we had the world's first openly lesbian head of government in 2009. Icelandic women are strong, and Icelandic society is modern and progressive. Okay, our population is the size of Anaheim, California. 350,000 people. But we can and we do punch above our weight. So for all of you who are in sort of a role or not role without defined expectations, or perhaps with a spouse who's better known than you, I would say that your job is to confound those expectations and not to lose sight of your own goals. So in my own example, I decided to write about it a little bit in the New York Times, talking about what it was that I felt weird about the First Lady role. I also tend not to travel with my husband so much unless it's for a particular state visit or official visit or something like that. Instead, I do a lot of trips by myself. This is me at the Zaatari Syrian refugee camp in Jordan that I visited at the invitation of UN Women. I also try to do a lot of speeches to use my voice a lot. I delivered the keynote address at the Startup Iceland conference in Reykjavik earlier this year to talk about my experience as an entrepreneur. But conversely then, I declined to be involved in the process of redecorating the new reception area at the presidential residence. Now, I know that these are small things in the greater context, but in doing them, what I'm trying to do is persist in helping to dissuade the notion that spouses, and especially female spouses, of heads of state and government are there to present some sort of a softer side to their husbands. Women who are maybe quite unfairly dismissed as to be just attending something to take in the view while their husbands take care of serious business. And speaking of outdated expectations, should we talk clothes for a minute? Not my favorite topic. Anyway, in Iceland, we're a little bit lucky that people aren't talk too much about their wardrobe choices. But obviously still, even there, articles on best dressed or worst dressed, obviously, tend to garner far more clicks and likes and retweets than stories on more substantive issues. And as First Lady, I'm by no means immune. I have actually had strangers come up to me and tell me that my hair looks much nicer longer, or that I should never wear green because it's not my color. I hope she's not watching. So again, I try to use this opportunity to send some messages about things that I believe are important. I try to wear comfortable clothes, and I try to showcase Icelandic design. And I also do this. This is me at the Icelandic version of the Oscars, wearing a $20 jacket that I bought used at the Red Cross store, that's like the Salvation Army, and wore to this event. As you can see, it got international attention on the BBC. And here on another occasion, this is the incoming state visit by the German presidential couple. The pink dress is also from the Red Cross, and the white jacket I borrowed from a friend. We should all borrow clothes from friends, I think, when we can. But in doing this, what I'm really trying to do is send the message that it's possible to economize and also to be sustainable, because we know that the fashion industry contributes a lot to our global greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the role of the president of Iceland is a non-political one or non-partisan one. So while I try not to take political stands, I also don't shy away from making subtle statements or using my voice to talk about things that are important. Because it's 2019, and I think we need to be hearing women's voices more, not less. Now, I know that it's a little bit ironic that I am speaking about, hopefully, my chance to talk a little bit about gender equality because of something that my husband has achieved. But you know, none of us wants to be judged as an accessory. And I think we should all re-examine our expectations and preconceptions of these all too usually female companions. You know, each and every one of us has a unique voice and an opportunity to help shape dialogue and defy expectations. Way back in the last century, I gave fate that little push by overfilling a styrofoam cup. And I accepted fate's push back when I found myself in Iceland and in a uniquely privileged position to serve. And I don't want to squander that opportunity. I want to help shape the debate now on the things that I feel are important and to which I can use my visibility to lend a voice. Now, I know that my situation is, to say the least, kind of an anomaly. But my circumstances aside, if you reflect on your own situation, I'd like you to consider how you can push fate, navigate fate's pushback, and positively, optimistically change something within your community, your life, your business, or the communities, lives, or businesses, or others. We can all make a difference. Thank you.